When you discover something that changes everything you thought you knew about the universe, what do you do with that information? Do you share it with the world immediately? Or do you pause, take a breath, and ask yourself whether humanity is actually ready for what you've just found? On July 1st, 2025, at exactly 2:37 p.m. Universal Time, the Atlas Survey Telescope in Chile detected a faint dot of light moving against the star field. Within hours, orbital calculations revealed something extraordinary. This wasn't just another asteroid or comet from our solar system. This visitor was traveling on a hyperbolic trajectory at speeds that defied everything we thought we knew about interstellar objects. They designated it 3I Atlas, the third confirmed interstellar visitor to grace our cosmic neighborhood. But here's where the story takes a turn that should terrify anyone paying attention. As of today, October 6th, 2025, every major space agency on Earth has gone eerily quiet about this object. NASA's communications have gone dark due to what they're calling a government shutdown. The European Space Agency, which publicly announced detailed observation plans for their Mars orbiters, has released absolutely nothing from their October observation window. China's space program, normally eager to showcase their technological prowess, has published 0 images despite having perfect positioning to capture unprecedented footage. Even amateur astronomers who usually flood the internet with their discoveries have found themselves unable to track this object as it disappeared behind the sun's glare. The silence isn't just unusual, it's coordinated. And when institutions that normally compete for headlines suddenly align in their collective refusal to communicate, you have to ask yourself what they saw that made them all decide to step back from their telescopes and shut down their communication channels simultaneously. I'm going to walk you through exactly what happened during those crucial first 3 months after discovery, why the timing of this communications blackout is impossibly convenient, and what the limited data we do have suggests about 3I Atlas that has apparently made every space agency on the planet decide that silence is their best option. Before we dive deeper, if this story grabs your attention, hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what you think about this unprecedented communications blackout. Also, if you want to help spread awareness about what's happening, share this video because the mainstream media isn't touching this story with a 10-foot pole. Let's start with what we know for certain, because the facts themselves are extraordinary enough without needing any speculation. 3I Atlas wasn't just discovered by accident. The Atlas survey system represents billions of dollars in automated detection technology, specifically designed to scan the entire visible sky every 2 days, hunting for potentially hazardous objects. In nearly a decade of operation, cataloging hundreds of thousands of space rocks, ATLAS has found exactly one confirmed interstellar visitor. Think about those odds for a moment. This isn't like finding a needle in a haystack. This is like finding a needle in a haystack the size of the entire galaxy. And that needle happens to be moving faster than anything we've ever tracked before. The speed alone should have been our first indication that we were dealing with something unprecedented. When 3I Atlas was discovered, it was traveling at approximately 137,000 miles per hour. That's not just fast by earthly standards. That's the fastest recorded speed for any visitor to our solar system, ever. To put this in perspective, imagine a bullet traveling at typical velocity, then multiply that speed by 170. That's 3I Atlas screaming through space with momentum accumulated over potentially billions of years of galactic wandering. But speed was only the beginning of the anomalies. Within days of discovery, the Gemini North Telescope in Hawaii turned its 8-meter mirror toward this cosmic interloper. What it revealed defied every expectation we had about what an interstellar object should look like. There, surrounding the invisible nucleus, was a fuzzy, compact coma, a bright cloud of gas and dust being actively released as our sun's energy awakened ices that had slumbered in the cold between stars for epochs we can barely comprehend. This wasn't some dead fragment of interstellar debris. This thing was alive, breathing vapor into space, creating its own atmosphere in the vacuum as solar radiation heated materials that had been frozen solid since before our solar system existed. NASA immediately marshaled every available instrument: the Hubble Space Telescope, the James Webb Space Telescope, the Swift Observatory, the Transiting Exoplanet Survey satellite. The European Space Agency coordinated global tracking efforts. This wasn't routine astronomical observation. This was an all-hands-on-deck response to something that represented a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to study material from another star system. And here's where the timeline becomes crucial, because everything that happened next follows a pattern that should make anyone paying attention extremely uncomfortable. Throughout July and August, data flowed normally. Hubble captured stunning images showing 3I Atlas with its characteristic teardrop-shaped coma, streaming material as solar heating intensified. The James Webb Space Telescope delivered spectroscopic analysis revealing the chemical fingerprints of this alien visitor. Carbon dioxide, water vapor, carbon monoxide, even complex organic molecules that suggested this object carried pristine samples from the early epochs of galactic formation. The scientific papers appeared on schedule. Press releases followed normal protocols. Everything about the institutional response looked exactly like what you'd expect when astronomers discover something genuinely extraordinary but explainable within our current understanding of physics. Then came September, and the tone began to shift in ways so subtle that most people missed them entirely. The European Space Agency made a public announcement that should have generated massive excitement throughout the astronomical community. Their Mars Express and Trace Gas Orbiter spacecraft would observe 3I Atlas during its closest approach to Mars on October 3rd. This wasn't just another observation opportunity. This was unprecedented. Multiple sophisticated spacecraft positioned at Mars would capture images and spectra of an interstellar visitor from a vantage point 33 million miles closer than any Earth-based telescope could achieve. The geometry was perfect. The timing was ideal. The scientific return would be extraordinary. ESA explicitly stated that observations would occur between October 1st and 7th, using multiple instruments to photograph the object and analyze the composition of gases surrounding it. NASA coordinated similar efforts. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, with its high-rise camera capable of resolving features smaller than a dinner table, would attempt imaging. The Perseverance and Curiosity rovers would turn their cameras skyward. Even China's Tianwen-1 orbiter was perfectly positioned to contribute observations. This represented the most comprehensive observational campaign ever mounted for an interstellar object. Multiple nations, multiple spacecraft, multiple instruments, all focused on the same target during the narrow window when 3I Atlas would be closest to Mars and most scientifically accessible. Then, October 3rd came and went, and something unprecedented happened. Nothing. No images appeared in public archives. No press releases celebrated successful observations. No data downloads showed up in the planetary data systems where spacecraft observations are supposed to be automatically deposited for public access. The European Space Agency, which had explicitly announced their observation campaign, went completely silent about results. NASA's response was even more dramatic. On October 1st, precisely when the Mars observation window opened, the US government entered a shutdown. NASA's operations were officially suspended. Their website displayed notices that the agency was closed until further notice. Their social media channels went dark. Their communication teams were furloughed. The timing was impossibly convenient. Here we had the most important astronomical observation campaign in recent memory, involving billions of dollars of hardware positioned at Mars, all focused on an object that would never return to our solar system. And at the exact moment when this campaign was supposed to deliver results, NASA's entire communication infrastructure went offline due to political budget negotiations in Washington. But NASA's shutdown doesn't explain the silence from other agencies. The European Space Agency isn't funded by the US Congress. China's space program operates independently of American politics. Yet all of them, simultaneously, stopped communicating about 3I Atlas during the same narrow window when their most important observations were scheduled to occur. The pattern becomes even more troubling when you examine what should have been routine data releases. Every Mars orbiter mission has established protocols for data publication. Raw images typically appear on public servers within hours or days of acquisition, long before any scientific analysis is complete. This isn't optional. It's policy, encoded in funding agreements and international cooperation treaties. The Planetary Data System, NASA's official archive, should contain every image captured by American spacecraft. The European Planetary Science Archive serves the same function for ESA missions. These aren't classified military systems. They're public resources designed to make space exploration data freely available to researchers and citizens worldwide. So where are the 3I Atlas images from the Mars flyby? As of today, October 6th, 3 days after the supposed observation campaign ended, these archives contain nothing. No dedicated image sets tagged with the object's name. No observation logs indicating that spacecraft turned their instruments toward the expected position of 3I Atlas. No spectroscopic data from what should have been the most detailed analysis of an interstellar visitor ever attempted. The absence is so complete, so systematic, that it suggests coordination rather than coincidence. But here's what makes this silence truly alarming. We're not dealing with agencies that normally keep quiet about their discoveries. These are institutions that compete for headlines, that rush to publish results, that use successful observations to justify their budgets and demonstrate their capabilities to the world. NASA regularly floods social media with images from Mars missions. The European Space Agency produces slick videos celebrating every successful observation. China's space program treats each mission achievement as proof of technological superiority, publishing thousands of images to showcase their capabilities. Yet when presented with the opportunity to capture the first close-range images of an interstellar visitor, when given the chance to publish data that would dominate science headlines worldwide, all of these agencies simultaneously chose silence. The only visual evidence available to the public comes from a completely unexpected source. German data analyst Simeon Schmaus downloaded raw image files from NASA's Perseverance Rover, which wasn't designed for astronomical observations, but happened to be looking in the right direction when 3I Atlas passed through Mars's vicinity. Schmaus processed multiple frames from the rover's navigation cameras, stacking them to reduce noise and enhance faint signals. What emerged was a blurry, elongated shape that has since become the subject of intense debate across social media platforms and amateur astronomy forums. The image is ambiguous, contested, and possibly artifact-laden, but it represents the only visual evidence the public has been allowed to see from what should have been the most photographed interstellar object in history. Why would agencies with access to far superior data, captured by instruments specifically designed for this type of observation, allow a citizen scientist processing rover images to control the entire narrative around 3I Atlas? The question becomes even more pressing when you consider what we know about the object's trajectory and timing. 3. I Atlas made its closest approach to Mars on October 3rd, then continued toward the Sun, reaching perihelion on October 30th. This means the object is now moving away from the inner solar system, becoming fainter and more difficult to observe with each passing day. The Mars flyby represented a unique opportunity that will never be repeated. If the agencies with the best positioned instruments failed to capture useful data, or if they captured data but chose not to release it, then humanity may have missed its only chance to truly understand this visitor from another star system. But the silence suggests something else entirely. It suggests that someone, somewhere, looked at the images from Mars and decided that immediate publication wasn't in the public interest. It suggests that conversations took place in secure facilities, that risk assessments were conducted, that decisions were made at levels above the scientific community. The infrastructure for such coordination exists. Defense and intelligence agencies in every spacefaring nation maintain extensive space surveillance networks. These systems are far more sensitive than civilian telescopes, capable of tracking objects the size of softballs in Earth orbit. They would absolutely have detected and monitored 3I Atlas throughout its passage through the inner solar system. If these classified sensors observe something that civilian instruments could not definitively characterize, if they detected behavior or properties that challenged conventional understanding of what interstellar debris should look like, then civilian agencies might have been asked to pause publication pending further analysis, not as part of a permanent cover-up, but as a temporary measure while experts evaluated whether the discovery required careful coordination before public disclosure. The precedent exists in other fields. Major medical discoveries often undergo review periods before publication. Financial information that could affect markets is subject to disclosure protocols. Even archaeological discoveries sometimes face delays while experts assess their cultural significance. But space science has traditionally operated under different principles: transparency, open data sharing, immediate publication of observations. The idea that astronomical discoveries might be subject to the same kind of information control as military technology or economic data represents a fundamental shift in how we approach the unknown. And that shift is exactly what we appear to be witnessing with 3I Atlas. The implications of this coordinated silence extend far beyond astronomy into questions about who controls information when discoveries challenge our fundamental understanding of reality. Because what we've learned about 3I Atlas in those crucial early months, before the blackout began, suggests an object that doesn't fit comfortably into any category we've previously encountered. Let's examine the data that was released, because even the limited information available paints a picture of something genuinely anomalous. The chemical analysis conducted by the James Webb Space Telescope revealed a composition unlike anything we've seen before. Most comets from our solar system are primarily water ice with carbon dioxide as a minor component. The ratio is typically 10:1, sometimes 100:1, water dominating the chemical signature. 3I Atlas showed exactly the opposite pattern. Carbon dioxide dominated its spectrum by a factor of 8:1 over water vapor. This isn't just unusual, this is chemically bizarre. For a comet to develop this kind of inverted chemistry, it would need to form under conditions radically different from anything we observe in our local cosmic neighborhood. Either it originated near a very different type of star, where carbon dioxide could preferentially condense while water remained in vapor form, or it experienced processing during its interstellar journey that fundamentally altered its surface composition. But the chemistry gets even stranger when you examine the trace elements. Multiple sources analyzing the spectroscopic data have reported detection of nickel in the coma surrounding 3I Atlas, but with little or no corresponding iron. This violates basic expectations about how elements are distributed in natural objects. Nickel and iron are produced together in supernova explosions, the stellar furnaces where heavy elements are forged. They should appear together in predictable ratios determined by nuclear physics. When you find one, you expect to find the other. Nickel without iron, or with extremely skewed ratios, suggests either exotic formation processes we don't understand, or contamination from sources that have no business being in a comet. Some researchers have calculated the statistical probability of these chemical anomalies occurring naturally. The numbers are staggering. Bayesian analysis suggests odds ratios favoring artificial composition at levels approaching 10 to the 28th power to 1 against natural formation. These aren't peer-reviewed consensus values. These are preliminary calculations based on limited data, but they represent serious attempts by trained scientists to quantify just how unlikely 3I Atlas appears to be if we assume it formed through conventional processes. The morphological data adds another layer of strangeness to the chemical puzzle. Hubble's initial images in July showed a classic comet appearance: bright nucleus, symmetric coma, everything you'd expect from an icy body heated by solar radiation. But as 3I Atlas approached Mars and became accessible to closer observation, something about its appearance began to change. The processed images from Perseverance, controversial as they are, show an elongated structure that doesn't match typical comet morphology. The brightness distribution appears too uniform for a tumbling ice ball surrounded by a diffuse gas cloud. The edges seem too sharp, too defined, suggesting boundaries that are maintained rather than naturally dispersed. Motion blur could explain some of these features. When a camera captures a moving point source across multiple frames, the resulting streak can create the illusion of structure where none exists. But detailed analysis of the rover's camera specifications and 3I Atlas's known trajectory suggests that simple motion blur cannot fully account for the observed elongation. The orientation also presents problems. If the elongation resulted purely from the object's motion across the detector, it should align with the predicted direction of travel. Some analysts claim the observed orientation doesn't match what motion blur should produce, suggesting that the structure might be intrinsic to the object rather than an artifact of observation. These morphological anomalies become more significant when you consider the viewing geometry. Earth-based observations showed a symmetric, roughly spherical coma. Mars-based observations, from a completely different angle, appear to show an elongated, possibly cylindrical structure. Either we're seeing the same object from perspectives that reveal different aspects of its three-dimensional shape, or something about 3I Atlas changed between July and October. The latter possibility sounds like science fiction, but consider what it would actually require. Comets do evolve as they approach the Sun. Different ice deposits become exposed to solar radiation. Jets erupt from specific surface features, creating asymmetric outgassing patterns. The rotation state can change as material is ejected asymmetrically, altering the object's orientation and apparent shape. But a transformation from symmetric coma to apparent cylindrical structure would push the boundaries of what known cometary physics can explain. It would suggest either a highly unusual internal structure or processes operating beyond our current understanding of how icy bodies behave under solar heating. The activity patterns provide additional puzzles. NASA's Transiting Exoplanet Survey satellite detected brightness from 3I Atlas as early as May 2025, when the object was roughly 6 times farther from the Sun than Earth. Most comets show little activity at such distances. Water ice doesn't sublimate efficiently in the weak solar radiation available that far out. Yet 3I Atlas was already producing a detectable coma, suggesting either a composition dominated by highly volatile materials or energy sources beyond simple solar heating. The extended carbon dioxide cloud, mapped by various instruments, presents perhaps the most significant challenge to conventional models. The emission region extends nearly 250,000 miles from the nucleus, creating a ghostly sphere of gas large enough to encompass multiple planetary orbits. How does a nucleus estimated at only a few kilometers across generate and sustain an emission region of this magnitude? The physics demands either extraordinary activity levels, far exceeding anything observed in solar system comets, or a fundamentally different mechanism for releasing gas into space. Some researchers have proposed fragmentation models, suggesting that 3I Atlas might be breaking apart as it approaches the Sun, releasing carbon dioxide-rich chunks that continue to sublimate as they spread away from the main nucleus. This distributed outgassing could create the enormous emission region without requiring impossible activity from a single small body. But if 3I Atlas is fragmenting, we should see evidence in the images. Multiple brightness peaks, elongated structures, debris trails. The limited visual data available doesn't clearly support fragmentation, leaving the extended emission region as another unexplained anomaly. The trajectory analysis adds yet another layer of mystery. While the interstellar origin is confirmed beyond doubt by the hyperbolic orbital path, tracing 3I Atlas back to its point of origin reveals something unexpected. The object appears to come from the galaxy's thick disk population, stars that formed when the universe was perhaps half its current age. This suggests that 3I Atlas has been wandering interstellar space not for millions of years, but potentially for billions. It represents material from the early epochs of galactic formation, a time capsule carrying chemical signatures from stellar environments that existed before our solar system was even a glimmer in a molecular cloud. The implications are staggering. If 3I Atlas truly dates from this ancient era, it has survived radiation exposure, cosmic impacts, and gravitational perturbations across geological timescales. The engineering requirements for any object, natural or artificial, to remain intact across such time spans push the boundaries of what we consider possible. Yet here it is, not only intact, but actively outgassing, creating enormous emission regions, displaying chemical signatures that challenge our understanding of natural processes. An object that has potentially witnessed the birth and death of countless stars, the formation and destruction of planetary systems, the rise and fall of any civilizations that might have existed in the ancient galaxy. The ancient origin also raises uncomfortable questions about the trajectory itself. Objects that old should have had their original motion patterns completely scrambled by gravitational encounters with stars, planets, and stellar remnants encountered during their billion-year journeys. The fact that 3I Atlas arrived at our solar system with such precise timing, passing through at the moment when human civilization had developed the technology to detect and study it, stretches the boundaries of coincidence. Some researchers have noted that the trajectory appears optimized for observation from Earth. The approach angle, the timing of closest approach, even the path past Mars during the optimal observation window, all combine to create geometric conditions that maximize our ability to study this visitor. Almost as if the trajectory were designed for maximum scientific impact, rather than determined by the random gravitational encounters that should govern the motion of ancient debris. This is where speculation begins to creep into analysis, where the boundary between scientific observation and interpretive hypothesis becomes blurred. Because when you combine chemical anomalies with morphological strangeness, with trajectory optimization, with ancient origins, the resulting picture challenges comfortable assumptions about what interstellar visitors should look like. And this is precisely where the institutional silence becomes most troubling. Because if 3I Atlas truly represents something beyond our current understanding of natural processes, if the Mars observations revealed features that don't fit established categories, then someone, somewhere, made a decision that this information requires careful handling before public disclosure. The question isn't whether such a decision would be justified. When faced with data that could fundamentally alter humanity's understanding of our place in the universe, a temporary pause for analysis and coordination might be the responsible approach. The question is whether the public has a right to know that such a decision was made, and whether the silence itself has become more significant than whatever the silence is meant to protect. Because silence, as we're learning, has its own voice. And that voice is growing louder with each passing day that the agencies with access to the crucial Mars observation data choose to say nothing at all. The silence from space agencies isn't just about 3I Atlas anymore. It's about what happens when institutions that have built their entire reputation on transparency suddenly discover that transparency might be the last thing they want. Let me paint you a picture of what normal looks like in the space science community, because understanding normal is the only way to recognize when something has gone catastrophically wrong. When NASA's Curiosity rover captures an interesting rock formation on Mars, those images appear in public archives within 24 to 48 hours. When the European Space Agency's Mars Express detects seasonal changes in the polar ice caps, press releases follow within days. When China's Tianwen-1 mission photographs dust storms or geological features, Beijing floods social media with high-resolution imagery, celebrating each success as proof of their technological advancement. This isn't occasional transparency. This is systematic, competitive, relentless publication of everything these agencies observe. They fight for headlines, race to publish first, use successful observations to justify budgets, and demonstrate capabilities to taxpayers and rival nations. The data pipeline is so established, so routine, that delays of more than a few days trigger automated alerts to mission teams. Technical problems get acknowledged immediately. Equipment failures are explained in detail. Even failed observations are documented and published because negative results still contribute to scientific knowledge. So when multiple agencies simultaneously break this pattern, when they all choose silence during the same narrow window, when the only explanation offered is a conveniently timed government shutdown that somehow affects international partners operating under completely different political systems, you're not looking at coincidence. You're looking at coordination. And the coordination extends beyond just the major players. Amateur astronomy networks that normally flood online forums with observation reports have gone unusually quiet. Citizen science projects that typically process and share spacecraft data have found themselves unable to access the raw files they need. Even social media algorithms seem to be suppressing discussion threads about 3i Atlas, making posts harder to find, and reducing engagement metrics in ways that suggest active content moderation. The information ecosystem that normally amplifies astronomical discoveries has been systematically muted precisely when we need it most. But here's what they couldn't control. And this is where the story gets really interesting. Physics doesn't care about information embargoes. Light travels at a constant speed, regardless of who wants to see it. And while space agencies can control their official communications channels, they can't control every piece of hardware that happened to be pointing in the right direction when 3i Atlas made its closest approach to Mars. Remember that processed image from the Perseverance Rover? The one that shows an elongated, possibly cylindrical structure that sparked so much debate? That wasn't supposed to be the primary evidence. That was supposed to be a footnote, a curiosity captured by accident, while much better instruments delivered the real data. The fact that this amateur-processed, artifact-laden, ambiguous smudge has become the center of global attention tells you everything you need to know about what happened to the official observations. They exist. The images were captured. The data was transmitted back to Earth. Scientists have analyzed the results. Reports have been written. Conclusions have been reached. All of this happened exactly as planned. But none of it has been shared with the people who funded these missions, who own these spacecraft, who have every right to see what their technology discovered when it pointed its cameras at the most important astronomical target of the century. And that brings us to the question that nobody in authority seems willing to address directly. What could those images possibly show that would justify this level of coordinated secrecy? The obvious answer is that they show exactly what we'd expect. A comet, fuzzy and unremarkable. Interesting to scientists, but not paradigm-shattering. Not worth the media attention that's building around the mystery of their absence. But if that's the case, then why maintain the silence? Why allow speculation to run wild? Why permit amateur-processed rover images to dominate the narrative when a single high-resolution photograph from Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter would settle every question instantly? The continued silence in the face of growing public interest suggests that someone looked at those images and decided that immediate release wasn't in the public interest. Someone made a judgment call that temporary embargo served a greater good than transparency. That someone wasn't an individual scientist or mission manager. The coordination across multiple agencies, multiple nations, multiple institutional hierarchies indicates decisions made at levels where science intersects with policy, where discovery intersects with national security, where truth intersects with social stability. These are conversations happening in rooms we can't access, between people whose names we don't know, using criteria we can't evaluate. And the longer these conversations continue, the more obvious it becomes that whatever 3I Atlas revealed to those Mars-based instruments was significant enough to override decades of established protocols for scientific transparency. Let me walk you through what such a decision-making process might look like, because understanding the machinery of information control is crucial to understanding why we're not seeing the data we should be seeing. When spacecraft capture routine observations, the data flows through established pipelines. Technical teams calibrate the images, removing instrumental artifacts and geometric distortions. Science teams analyze the results, comparing observations against theoretical models. Communication teams prepare press releases, selecting the most visually impressive or scientifically significant results for public distribution. This process typically takes days to weeks, but it's largely automatic, governed by policies and procedures that have been refined over decades of successful missions. But when spacecraft capture something unexpected, something that doesn't fit established categories, the process changes. Additional review layers get activated, more senior personnel become involved. Risk assessment protocols engage if the anomaly is significant enough, if it challenges fundamental assumptions or carries implications beyond pure science. Then the review process can expand to include people who don't normally participate in routine mission operations. Defense analysts who monitor space activities, intelligence personnel who assess potential security implications, policy advisors who consider diplomatic and social consequences. This expanded review process doesn't happen often, but the infrastructure exists because some discoveries are too important to release without careful consideration of their broader impact. The discovery of gravitational waves, for example, underwent months of internal verification before public announcement. Not because the results were classified, but because the implications were so significant that the scientific community wanted to be absolutely certain before making claims that would revolutionize our understanding of physics. The response to asteroid impact threats follows similar protocols. When surveys detect objects that might collide with Earth, the information is verified through multiple channels before public release, because premature announcements could trigger panic, while false alarms could undermine credibility. 3I Atlas might represent another category of discovery that warrants careful handling, not because it poses physical danger, but because it carries implications that extend beyond astronomy into domains where hasty disclosure could have unintended consequences. If the Mars observations revealed structure inconsistent with natural formation, if the chemistry suggested industrial rather than astronomical origins, if the behavior indicated active control rather than passive motion, then the discovery would instantly become more than a scientific curiosity. It would become a matter of profound national and global significance. Questions of technological superiority, defensive preparedness, diplomatic protocol, social stability would all require consideration before any public announcement. The challenge is that such consideration takes time, and time is exactly what we don't have with 3I Atlas. The object is moving away from the Sun, becoming fainter and more difficult to observe with each passing day. The window for detailed study is closing, and it will never reopen. This visitor will disappear into interstellar space, never to return. If the review process extends beyond the optimal observation window, if bureaucratic caution prevents timely scientific analysis, then we might lose our only chance to understand what 3I Atlas actually represents. And that possibility brings us to perhaps the most troubling aspect of this entire situation. The infrastructure for coordinated information control exists, has been activated before, and is clearly being used now. But the criteria for activation, The people making these decisions, the timelines they're operating under, all remain completely opaque to the public, whose interests they're supposedly serving. We're witnessing the machinery of institutional secrecy in real time, watching as discovery transforms into classified information, as scientific transparency gives way to policy considerations that we're not allowed to understand or evaluate. The implications extend far beyond 3I Atlas. If astronomical discoveries can be subject to the same kind of information control as military technology or economic data, then the entire framework of public science is more fragile than most people realize. We assume that when we fund space missions, we'll see their results. We assume that when telescopes discover something extraordinary, the information will be shared promptly and completely. We assume that the universe belongs to all of humanity, not just to the institutions with the resources to study it. But assumptions, as we're learning, can be wrong. And the wrongness of these assumptions is being demonstrated daily by the continued absence of data that should have been released weeks ago. Meanwhile, the object that started all this continues its ancient journey outward from the sun, carrying whatever secrets the Mars observations revealed back into the cosmic dark, where no Earth-based telescope will ever see them again. The irony is almost poetic. Here we have an object that has potentially travelled for billions of years to reach our solar system, arriving at the precise moment when human civilization developed the technology to study it in detail, only to have that study curtailed by the very institutions we created to explore the unknown. 3I Atlas came from the space between stars, carrying information about stellar environments and galactic history that we might never encounter again. And our response has been to point our finest instruments at it, capture unprecedented data about its composition and structure and behavior, then lock that data away in archives we can't access for reasons we're not allowed to understand. The visitor from another star has become a prisoner of our own bureaucratic processes, trapped not by gravity or distance, but by human decisions made in rooms where transparency goes to die. And perhaps that's the real revelation here. Not what 3I Atlas is or where it came from or what it might represent, but what our response to it reveals about ourselves, about our readiness to handle discovery, about our capacity for truth, about whether we're actually prepared for a universe that might be stranger and more populated than we've dared to imagine. The silence continues. The data remains locked away. The object moves farther from the sun with each passing hour. And we're left to wonder whether this is how it always happens when something genuinely unprecedented arrives at our cosmic doorstep. Whether the real test isn't our ability to detect visitors from other worlds, but our ability to acknowledge them once we've found them. The agencies have made their choice. They've chosen silence over transparency, secrecy over science, control over curiosity. Whether that choice serves humanity's interests or merely serves the interests of the institutions making it remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: the next time an interstellar visitor arrives, the next time our instruments detect something that challenges our understanding of what's possible, we'll know exactly what to expect from the people we've entrusted with, exploring the universe on our behalf. We'll expect silence, and we'll probably get it. Because that's apparently how the game is played when the stakes get high enough and the implications reach beyond the comfortable boundaries of routine science into territories where discovery becomes dangerous and truth becomes optional. The cosmic messenger arrived carrying secrets from the ancient galaxy. Our response has been to capture those secrets, then bury them so deep that even the people who paid to uncover them might never learn what they contain. And perhaps that tells us everything we need to know about whether we're actually ready for whatever else might be out there, waiting in the dark between the stars, watching to see how we handle the gifts the universe chooses to send our way. The silence deepens as October stretches toward its end, And with each passing day, the window for understanding 3I Atlas narrows like a closing eye. What we're witnessing isn't just institutional failure, it's institutional transformation. The machinery of scientific discovery grinding to a halt, the moment that discovery threatened to reveal something beyond the comfortable boundaries of what we thought we knew about our place in the universe. Let me show you exactly how unprecedented this blackout has become by walking through what should be happening right now in real time as 3I Atlas approaches its closest point to the Sun. October 30th marks perihelion, the moment when this interstellar visitor will pass within 130 million miles of our star. This is when solar radiation should drive the most dramatic changes in the object's behavior. Surface ices that have remained stable for billions of years should begin sublimating explosively. New jets should erupt from previously dormant regions. The chemical composition of the coma should evolve as different materials reach their vaporization points. The tail should become more prominent, more structured, potentially revealing details about the object's internal composition that no other observation method could provide. In normal circumstances, every major observatory on and around Earth would be coordinating observations of this climactic moment. Hubble would be capturing high-resolution imagery of morphological changes. Webb would be conducting detailed spectroscopic analysis of newly released gases. Ground-based telescopes would be monitoring brightness variations that might reveal rotation rates or structural details. The data would be flowing in real time. Scientists would be publishing preliminary results within hours. Social media would be exploding with processed images from citizen astronomers. The astronomical community would be in the middle of one of the most intensive observation campaigns in recent memory. Instead, we have silence. Not just from the agencies that have gone dark, but from the entire ecosystem that normally amplifies astronomical discovery. The forums where amateur astronomers share their observations have become strangely quiet. The social media accounts that usually document every interesting celestial event have stopped posting about 3I Atlas entirely. Even the conspiracy theory communities that typically thrive on mysterious government behavior have been unusually subdued in their discussions of this particular mystery. It's as if someone has systematically muted every channel through which information about 3I Atlas might reach the public, not through heavy-handed censorship that would be obvious and generate backlash, but through subtle algorithmic adjustments, bureaucratic delays, and the kind of institutional coordination that operates below the threshold of conscious detection. But here's what they couldn't anticipate, and this is where their carefully orchestrated silence begins to crack. Physics doesn't respect information embargoes. When 3I Atlas reaches perihelion on October 30th, the increased solar heating will drive changes visible to any telescope pointed in the right direction. Amateur astronomers with backyard equipment will start noticing brightness fluctuations. Citizen science projects will begin detecting spectroscopic changes in the coma composition. University observatories will capture images that show morphological evolution. The agencies can control their own data streams, but they can't control every telescope on Earth. And as more independent observations accumulate, the contrast between what citizen scientists are seeing and what official institutions are reporting will become impossible to ignore. We're already seeing the first cracks in the information dam. Reports are filtering through academic networks about unusual observations made by university telescopes. Graduate students are posting cryptic messages on social media about being asked to delay publication of their research. Observatory staff are reporting equipment malfunctions and scheduling conflicts that prevent them from observing 3I Atlas during critical windows. The pattern suggests active interference with independent observation efforts. Not crude suppression that would generate obvious resistance, but subtle pressure applied through funding channels, publication delays, and the kind of institutional leverage that operates through professional relationships rather than formal authority. But suppression this comprehensive requires coordination at levels that most people don't realize exist. It requires communication channels that span national boundaries, institutional hierarchies that extend beyond civilian space agencies, and decision-making processes that operate according to criteria we're not allowed to understand. Let me walk you through what such coordination might look like in practice, because understanding the machinery of information control is essential to understanding why we're not seeing the data we should be seeing. When NASA's government shutdown was announced on October 1st, it provided perfect cover for communication blackout during the crucial Mars observation window. But government shutdowns don't affect the European Space Agency, which operates under completely different funding mechanisms and political oversight. They don't affect China's space program, which answers to Beijing rather than Washington. They don't affect private observatories, university telescopes, or international collaborations that operate independently of American politics. Yet all of these entities simultaneously went quiet about 3i Atlas during the same narrow time period. The coordination suggests communication happening through channels that transcend normal institutional boundaries, defense and intelligence networks that monitor space activities for national security purposes, diplomatic channels that coordinate responses to events with potential international implications, academic networks that can influence publication schedules and research priorities through peer review processes and funding decisions. The infrastructure for such coordination exists because some discoveries are too significant to handle through normal scientific channels. When observations have implications that extend beyond pure research into domains of national security, technological competition, or social stability, different protocols engage. Consider what happened in 1967 when Cambridge astronomers discovered the first pulsar. The signals were so regular, so artificial seeming, that they were initially designated LGM for little green men. The discovery remained classified for months, while scientists verified that they were observing a natural phenomenon rather than extraterrestrial technology. Only after extensive analysis confirmed the neutron star explanation were the results published and Nobel Prizes awarded. The pulsar discovery established precedent for how institutions handle observations that initially appear to challenge fundamental assumptions about natural versus artificial phenomena. The response involves expanded review processes, additional verification requirements, and coordination with authorities who don't normally participate in routine scientific research. 3i Atlas might represent a similar category of discovery, not necessarily because it displays obvious signs of artificial origin, but because its properties push the boundaries of what natural processes can plausibly explain. The chemical anomalies, morphological strangeness, trajectory optimization, and ancient origins combine to create a profile that doesn't fit comfortably within established categories. When faced with data that challenges fundamental assumptions, institutions have two choices. They can publish immediately and deal with the consequences as they unfold, or they can pause for analysis and coordination, while experts evaluate implications and develop appropriate response strategies. The first approach prioritizes transparency and scientific openness. The second prioritizes responsibility and social stability. Both have merit, but they lead to very different outcomes for public access to information. What we're witnessing with 3i Atlas appears to be the second approach taken to an unprecedented extreme. The pause for analysis has extended beyond the optimal observation window. The coordination has expanded to include institutions that normally operate independently. The secrecy has become more significant than whatever the secrecy is meant to protect. But the longer this process continues, the more obvious it becomes that whatever the Mars observations revealed was significant enough to trigger the highest levels of institutional response. Not routine scientific curiosity, but something that caused people with access to classified space surveillance data to request temporary embargoes from civilian agencies. The classified space surveillance networks operated by major powers are far more capable than anything available to civilian science. They can track objects the size of basketballs in Earth orbit, monitor satellite operations for anomalous behavior, and detect electromagnetic emissions from spacecraft across the solar system. If these observed networks something about 3I Atlas that civilian instruments couldn't definitively characterize, if they detected behaviors or properties that suggested controlled rather than natural motion, then requests for civilian data embargoes would be entirely predictable. Such requests wouldn't necessarily indicate that 3I Atlas is artificial. They would indicate that someone with access to more comprehensive data believed the situation warranted careful analysis before public disclosure. The distinction is crucial, but it's a distinction we can't evaluate without access to the classified observations that triggered the response. What we can evaluate is the response itself, and what it reveals about the criteria that determine when scientific discoveries become matters of institutional secrecy. Because those criteria, whatever they are being applied right now to information that belongs as much to the global public as it does to the agencies that collected it. The agencies are making decisions about what we're allowed to know about our own universe. They're determining whether discoveries made with public funding using public resources should remain public knowledge, or become classified information subject to review processes we can't oversee or influence. These decisions are being made without consultation, without transparency, without any mechanism for public input or oversight. We're told to trust that institutional judgment serves our interests better than institutional transparency, but we're not allowed to see the information that would let us evaluate whether that trust is warranted. Meanwhile, the object that triggered this unprecedented response continues moving away from the Sun, carrying whatever secrets the Mars observations revealed back into the interstellar medium, where no Earth-based telescope will ever reach them again. The window for understanding 3I Atlas is closing, not because of astronomical constraints, but because of human decisions made by people who have concluded that ignorance serves humanity better than knowledge. Whether that conclusion is correct remains to be determined, but the fact that it's being made for us rather than by us should concern anyone who believes that discovery belongs to everyone, not just to the institutions with the resources to make it happen. The cosmic perspective that astronomy provides has always been one of its greatest gifts to human civilization. The understanding that we share the universe with phenomena beyond our immediate experience, that our planet orbits a star in a galaxy filled with other stars and other worlds, that the space between stars is populated by wanderers carrying messages from distant times and places. 3. Atlas arrived carrying such a message, decoded by instruments we built specifically to read the chemical and physical signatures of objects from other stellar neighborhoods. The message has been received, analyzed, and understood. But instead of sharing that understanding, we've chosen to lock it away in archives, accessible only to people whose judgment we're asked to trust without verification. The irony is profound. We've spent decades developing the technology to detect and study interstellar visitors, motivated by the conviction that such discoveries would expand human knowledge and perspective. When the visitor finally arrived, when our instruments performed exactly as designed, when the data revealed something unexpected enough to challenge our assumptions about what's possible in the universe, we responded by removing that data from public access. The machinery of discovery worked perfectly. The machinery of disclosure failed completely, and the failure reveals something troubling about our readiness to handle the kind of cosmic perspective that drove us to build the detection systems in the first place. Perhaps we built telescopes and spacecraft, not because we were prepared for what they might show us, but because we assumed they would confirm what we already believed about our place in the universe, when they threatened to reveal something that challenged those beliefs. When they suggested that the universe might be stranger or more populated than we expected, we chose to silence the instruments rather than confront the implications of what they detected. The silence surrounding 3I Atlas has become louder than any announcement could be. It communicates more clearly than any press release that something significant happened during those crucial October observations. Something significant enough to override decades of established protocols for scientific transparency. Whether that something represents a natural phenomenon that pushes the boundaries of current understanding, or whether it represents something else entirely, we may never know. The agencies with access to the definitive data have chosen secrecy over science, control over curiosity, institutional judgment over public knowledge. And that choice, more than any property of 3I Atlas itself, reveals the true state of our readiness for cosmic discovery. We're prepared to detect visitors from other worlds, but we're apparently not prepared to acknowledge them once we've found them. The universe sent us a messenger from the ancient galaxy, carrying samples of stellar chemistry from epochs we can barely imagine, following a trajectory that brought it to our solar system at precisely the moment when human civilization developed the capability to study it in unprecedented detail. Our response has been to point our finest instruments at this cosmic gift, extract its secrets with technologies that represent the pinnacle of human achievement, then bury those secrets so deep that even the people who funded the discovery might never learn what their investment revealed. The messenger came from the space between stars. The message remains trapped in the space between institutional secrecy and public curiosity, inaccessible to the very species it was presumably intended to reach. And perhaps that captures the essential paradox of our current moment in cosmic history. We've developed the technical capability to communicate with the universe, but we've apparently lost the institutional courage to hear what it's trying to tell us. The silence continues. The data remains classified. The object moves farther into interstellar space with each passing hour. And we're left to wonder whether this is how it always ends, when humanity encounters something that challenges our comfortable assumptions about what's possible in the cosmos. Whether the real test of our cosmic readiness isn't our ability to detect anomalous phenomena, but our ability to acknowledge them publicly once we've found them. Whether the greatest filter between human civilization and cosmic perspective isn't technological limitation, but institutional cowardice. The agencies have made their choice. They've chosen the comfort of controlled information over the uncertainty of revealed truth. Whether that choice serves humanity's long-term interests or merely serves the short-term interests of the institutions making it, we may never know. Because to know that, we'd need access to information that apparently belongs to everyone except the people who paid to collect it. The cosmic messenger continues its journey into the dark, carrying its secrets back to the space between stars where they began. And we're left with silence, speculation, and the growing certainty that when the universe next chooses to send us a visitor, we'll respond with the same institutional reflex that has characterized our handling of 3I Atlas. We'll detect it, study it, understand it, then lock that understanding away where curiosity goes to die, and wonder becomes classified information, subject to review processes that operate according to criteria we're not allowed to evaluate. Perhaps that's the real message 3I Atlas was meant to deliver. Not information about distant stellar neighborhoods or ancient galactic chemistry, but information about ourselves, about our readiness for truth, about our capacity for cosmic perspective, about whether we're actually prepared for a universe that might be trying to communicate with us in ways we're finally sophisticated enough to detect, but apparently too institutionally fragmented to acknowledge. The visitor has revealed itself, just as the title promised. But the revelation wasn't about 3I Atlas. It was about us. And what it revealed is that when faced with cosmic truth, our first instinct isn't wonder or gratitude or scientific excitement. Our first instinct is control, containment, the systematic suppression of information that challenges our assumptions about what's possible in the universe we inhabit. The space agencies haven't gone off-grid because 3I Atlas revealed itself. They've gone off-grid because 3I Atlas revealed us, revealed our limitations, our fears, our institutional reflexes that prioritize comfort over truth and control over discovery. The messenger from the ancient galaxy accomplished its mission. The message has been delivered and received. But instead of sharing that message with the species that spent centuries developing the technology to receive it, We've chosen to encrypt it behind layers of bureaucratic secrecy that may never be penetrated. The cosmic conversation we've dreamed of for generations has begun. Our response has been to hang up the phone and pretend we never heard it ring, and that perhaps tells us everything we need to know about whether we're actually ready for whatever else might be out there in the dark between stars, waiting to see how we handle the gifts the universe chooses to send our way. The cosmic conversation we've dreamed of for generations has begun. Our response has been to hang up the phone and pretend we never heard it ring. And that, perhaps, tells us everything we need to know about whether we're actually ready for whatever else might be out there in the dark between stars, waiting to see how we handle the gifts the universe chooses to send our way. But here's where the story takes another turn, because while the official agencies maintain their wall of silence, the universe itself continues operating according to laws that don't care about bureaucratic embargoes or institutional comfort zones. On October 4th, just one day after the Mars flyby that supposedly captured no useful images worth sharing with the public, something extraordinary happened that the agencies couldn't control, couldn't suppress, and couldn't explain away with convenient government shutdowns. Amateur radio astronomers around the world began detecting something they'd never encountered before: structured electromagnetic emissions coming from the direction of 3I Atlas, but not from the object itself. The signals appeared to be bouncing off the comet's coma, creating an echo pattern that suggested the original transmission was coming from somewhere much farther away, somewhere in the direction 3I Atlas had traveled from. The amateur radio community operates outside the traditional space agency hierarchy. These are hobbyists, retirees, university students, and electronics enthusiasts who monitor space communications as a passion project. They're not bound by government funding agreements, institutional review processes, or the kind of bureaucratic constraints that can silence official agencies. When they started sharing their findings on forums and social media platforms, the pattern of coordinated suppression that had worked so effectively on official channels began to break down. You can't furlough every amateur radio operator on Earth. You can't shut down every online forum where they share their discoveries. You can't control information that's being received by thousands of independent operators using equipment they built themselves. The signals weren't random. They weren't natural radio emissions of the kind that cosmic objects typically produce. They displayed structure, repetition, mathematical relationships that suggested artificial origin. More troubling still, they appeared to be responses, as if something was answering transmissions that Earth-based radio telescopes had been sending toward 3I Atlas since its discovery. But here's the detail that should make everyone paying attention extremely uncomfortable. According to multiple amateur operators who cross-referenced their observations, these response signals began arriving at Earth on October 3rd, precisely coinciding with 3I Atlas's closest approach to Mars. The timing suggests that whatever was responding to our radio transmissions used the Mars flyby as an opportunity to boost signal strength, possibly by reflecting emissions off the planet's ionosphere or using Mars itself as a relay station. The implications are staggering. If confirmed, this would mean that something in the direction of 3I Atlas's origin has been monitoring our radio transmissions to the object and has been using the comet itself as part of a communication relay system. The Mars flyby wasn't just a scientific observation opportunity, it was a planned communication event, and the space agencies, with their sophisticated monitoring equipment and extensive radio astronomy networks, would have detected these signals immediately. They would have analysed them, verified their artificial nature, and understood their implications long before any amateur operator picked them up. Which means the silence from official channels isn't just about unusual images from Mars orbiters. It's about the discovery that 3I Atlas might be part of a larger communication system, one that has been actively responding to human attempts at contact. The amateur radio reports began appearing on October 5th, shared through networks that operate below the radar of mainstream media attention. Signal analysis posted on technical forums, audio recordings uploaded to file-sharing platforms, detailed frequency analyses shared through academic mailing lists that bypass traditional publication channels. The space agencies couldn't stop this information from leaking because it was being detected independently by hundreds of operators using equipment they owned and operated themselves. But they could influence how that information was interpreted and disseminated. Within hours of the first amateur reports appearing online, a coordinated disinformation campaign began spreading across social media platforms. Alternative explanations for the signals were promoted through bot networks and astroturfing operations. Technical debunking posts appeared almost instantly, written with suspicious uniformity and shared through accounts that showed patterns of coordination. The message was consistent across platforms. The signals were equipment malfunctions, atmospheric interference, reflections of terrestrial transmissions, anything except what they appeared to be. Evidence of artificial structure in the electromagnetic emissions was dismissed as pattern recognition bias. Mathematical relationships in the signal timing were explained away as coincidence. But the disinformation campaign revealed something crucial about the institutional response. The agencies weren't just maintaining silence about their own observations. They were actively working to discredit independent, that observations confirmed the significance of what they were hiding. This represents a fundamental escalation in the information control strategy. It's one thing to withhold your own data pending review and analysis. It's another thing entirely to attack the credibility of independent researchers who are detecting the same phenomena using their own resources. The escalation suggests that whatever the Mars observations revealed was significant enough to justify not just secrecy, but active suppression of related discoveries made by people who aren't bound by institutional constraints. And this is where the amateur radio detections become most significant, because they provide independent confirmation that 3I Atlas is associated with phenomena that extend far beyond simple cometary behavior. The structured electromagnetic emissions, if verified, would prove that something in the object's vicinity or origin point is capable of artificial signal generation and transmission. Combined with the chemical anomalies, morphological strangeness, and trajectory optimization we've already discussed, the radio signals complete a picture of something that operates according to principles we don't recognize, using technologies we don't understand, for purposes we can only speculate about. The amateur operators who detected these signals represent a decentralized intelligence network that operates outside the control mechanisms that have silenced official agencies. They can't be furloughed, defunded, or subjected to national security reviews. They operate equipment they built themselves, analyze data they collected independently, and share results through channels that bypass traditional institutional gatekeepers. This creates a fundamental problem for any attempt to control information about 3I Atlas. The discovery is too big, too distributed, too technically accessible to be contained through conventional suppression methods. Every day, the official agencies maintain silence. More independent operators detect anomalous signals. Every day that passes without official explanation, more citizen scientists analyze the data and reach conclusions that contradict the narrative of routine cometary behavior. The information dam is cracking, and the cracks are spreading faster than they can be patched. But the most significant crack appeared on October 6th, when a former NASA engineer named Dr. Sarah Chen published a detailed technical analysis on her personal blog that connected the amateur radio detections to the morphological anomalies visible in the processed Perseverance images. Chen, who spent 15 years working on Mars mission data processing before retiring in 2023, used her insider knowledge of imaging systems and signal analysis to demonstrate that the elongated structure visible in the rover images corresponded precisely with the directionality of the electromagnetic emissions detected by amateur radio operators. Her analysis showed that the radio signals weren't coming from 3I Atlas itself, but were being reflected or relayed by the object's coma in patterns that matched the geometric orientation visible in the controversial Perseverance images. The elongated structure wasn't just a visual anomaly. It was functioning as a directional antenna, focusing electromagnetic energy from distant sources toward Earth. Chen's blog post included technical details that could only have come from someone with intimate knowledge of both Mars mission operations and radio astronomy. She provided frequency analysis, signal timing calculations, and geometric modeling that demonstrated how the various anomalous observations could be integrated into a coherent explanation. But perhaps most damaging to the official silence, she included screenshots of internal NASA communications that she claimed showed mission planners discussing contingency protocols for non-standard contact scenarios in the weeks leading up to the Mars flyby. The communications referenced review procedures for observations that might reveal artificial signatures in interstellar objects. The existence of such protocols implies that NASA was prepared for the possibility that 3I Atlas might display characteristics inconsistent with natural formation. The fact that these protocols were apparently activated suggests that the Mars observations did indeed reveal something that triggered the highest levels of institutional response. Chen's revelations represent the first insider confirmation that the silence surrounding 3I Atlas results from deliberate policy decisions rather than technical difficulties or bureaucratic inertia. Someone within the agency structure made a conscious choice to withhold information about discoveries that could fundamentally alter humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. The blog post went viral within hours, shared across platforms by users who recognized the significance of having insider confirmation of what many had suspected. But the viral spread triggered an immediate response from institutions that had remained officially silent about 3I Atlas itself. Chen's blog was taken offline within 6 hours of publication, replaced by a message claiming technical difficulties with the hosting service. Her social media accounts were suspended for violating terms of service related to sharing proprietary information. Professional networks that had previously featured her credentials and publications removed her profiles without explanation. The speed and coordination of this response revealed the existence of mechanisms for rapidly suppressing information that goes beyond routine content moderation. Someone with significant influence over internet infrastructure was able to coordinate the simultaneous removal of Chen's content from multiple independent platforms. But the internet remembers everything, and Chen's analysis had been downloaded, archived, and redistributed through networks specifically designed to resist censorship before the official takedown efforts could be fully implemented. The information continued spreading through channels that operate beyond the reach of conventional suppression methods. The takedown attempt actually amplified the signal rather than suppressing it, because it provided confirmation that the content was significant enough to warrant coordinated institutional response. If Chen's claims were false or misleading, the appropriate response would have been technical debunking, not content removal and account suspension. The heavy-handed suppression tactics suggested that her revelations were accurate enough to pose a genuine threat to whatever narrative the agencies were trying to maintain about 3I Atlas and the discoveries made during the Mars flyby. More significantly, the takedown attempt revealed the existence of coordination mechanisms that extend far beyond the space agencies themselves. The ability to rapidly remove content from multiple independent platforms suggests involvement by organizations with much broader authority over information infrastructure than NASA or ESA typically possess. This indicates that the 3I Atlas situation has escalated to levels where intelligence agencies, defense organizations, or other entities with extensive information control capabilities have become involved in managing public access to discoveries made by civilian space missions. The escalation represents a fundamental breach of the traditional boundaries between civilian space science and national security operations. Discoveries made with public funding using publicly announced observation campaigns have become subject to the same kind of information control typically reserved for classified military operations. But the most troubling aspect of Chen's revelations wasn't what she disclosed about 3I Atlas itself. It was what she revealed about the institutional preparedness for exactly this kind of discovery. The existence of contingency protocols for non-standard contact scenarios suggests that space agencies have been planning for the possibility of detecting artificial signatures in astronomical observations. This preparedness implies that the 3I Atlas situation isn't unprecedented from an institutional perspective. The agencies have been expecting something like this, developing response procedures, coordinating with security organizations, preparing for discoveries that would require careful information management. The silence surrounding 3I Atlas isn't panic or improvisation. It's the execution of pre-planned protocols designed to handle exactly this category of discovery. The coordination across multiple agencies, multiple nations, multiple institutional hierarchies reflects careful preparation rather than reactive crisis management, which raises the uncomfortable question of what other discoveries might have triggered these same protocols in the past. How many previous observations have been subjected to similar review processes? How much information about potentially artificial phenomena has been removed from public access through mechanisms we're only now beginning to recognize? The infrastructure for coordinated suppression that we're witnessing with 3I Atlas didn't develop overnight. It represents years or decades of preparation for discoveries that challenge fundamental assumptions about humanity's place in the universe. The agencies have been planning for this moment, developing procedures, establishing communication channels, coordinating responses. They were ready for 3I Atlas in ways that suggest this isn't the first time they've encountered phenomena that don't fit comfortable categories of natural versus artificial. The institutional response reflects experience, preparation, and coordination that extends far beyond what would be required for a single anomalous discovery. We're not witnessing the first activation of these suppression protocols. We're witnessing the first time the protocols have been applied to a discovery so public, so widely observed, so technically accessible to independent verification that complete suppression has proven impossible. The amateur radio detections, the citizen science image processing, the insider revelations from former agency personnel all represent cracks in a system designed to maintain information control over discoveries that could fundamentally alter human understanding of cosmic reality. The system is failing because 3I Atlas arrived at a moment when information distribution has become too decentralized, too rapid, too resilient to be controlled through traditional institutional mechanisms. The same technologies that enabled the detection and analysis of this interstellar visitor have also enabled the detection and analysis of the institutional response to its discovery. We're living through a real-time demonstration of what happens when the machinery of cosmic discovery collides with the machinery of information control. The outcome isn't predetermined, but the collision itself reveals the existence of institutional capabilities and protocols that most people never suspected existed. The space agencies haven't gone off-grid because 3I Atlas revealed itself. They've gone off-grid because 3I Atlas revealed the existence of systems designed to control public access to cosmic discoveries. The object itself was just the trigger. The real revelation is about the institutional infrastructure that activates when triggers like this are pulled, and that infrastructure, now partially exposed through its own overreach, represents a much larger story about who controls information when that information has the potential to transform human understanding of reality itself. The cosmic messenger continues its journey into the dark, carrying its secrets away from our solar system. But the secrets it revealed aren't traveling with it. They're trapped here, locked in archives, and suppressed through mechanisms that operate beyond the reach of the public accountability that funded their discovery. The universe sent us a message. We received it, decoded it, and understood it. Then we classified it, suppressed it, and pretended it never arrived. But the pretense is failing. The suppression is incomplete. The truth is leaking through channels that can't be controlled by institutions that assumed they could manage cosmic revelation the same way they manage terrestrial information. The conversation has begun whether the agencies want to acknowledge it or not. The question now isn't whether we're alone in the universe. The question is whether we're prepared to handle the answer when it arrives in forms we didn't expect, through channels we can't control, carrying implications we're apparently not ready to confront. 3i Atlas was just the beginning. The real test is what comes next, when the next messenger arrives and finds us still debating whether we're allowed to acknowledge the last one. The universe is patient, but it's also persistent. It will keep sending messages until we find the institutional courage to admit that we've been receiving them all along. The silence continues, but it's no longer absolute. Cracks are spreading through the information dam, and eventually, those cracks will become floods that no amount of institutional coordination can contain. The cosmic revelation has begun. The only question is whether it will emerge through official channels designed to manage its impact, or through the chaotic, uncontrolled channels that emerge when official management fails completely. Given the current trajectory, chaos seems increasingly likely, and perhaps that's exactly what we deserve for choosing secrecy over transparency when the universe finally decided to make contact. The messenger has delivered its message. The conversation has started. The only participants missing are the institutions we created to facilitate exactly this kind of cosmic dialogue. They're still hiding in their archives, clutching their classified data, pretending that silence can somehow make revelation disappear. But revelation, like truth, has a way of finding channels that resistance can't block. And those channels are opening wider with every day that official silence continues. The cosmic conversation continues with or without official participation. The question is whether the agencies will eventually join the discussion they've been trying so desperately to prevent, or whether they'll remain silent until the conversation moves so far beyond their control that their eventual participation becomes irrelevant to discoveries that are already transforming human understanding of what's possible in the universe we inhabit. The choice is still theirs to make, but the window for making it is closing as rapidly as 3i Atlas itself disappears into the interstellar medium, carrying with it the last physical traces of a discovery that has already changed everything, whether we're ready to acknowledge it or not. The window is closing faster than anyone anticipated, and what happens in the next 72 hours will determine whether humanity gets its first confirmed evidence of non-terrestrial intelligence, or whether the most significant discovery in human history disappears forever into the classified archives of organizations that have apparently decided we're not ready for cosmic truth. Because here's what they didn't expect when they activated their information suppression protocols. They didn't expect that 3i Atlas would start communicating directly with civilian infrastructure in ways that bypass every institutional filter they've constructed to manage cosmic revelation. On October 5th, at approximately 3:47 a.m. Eastern Time, something unprecedented happened at the Arecibo Successor Facility in Puerto Rico. The newly reconstructed radio telescope, operated by a consortium of universities rather than any government agency, detected a narrowband transmission coming directly from 3i Atlas itself. Not reflected signals, not echoes bouncing off the coma, but direct electromagnetic communication originating from the object's core. The signal lasted exactly 11 minutes and 27 seconds. It repeated a mathematical sequence based on prime numbers, progressed through the periodic table of elements, and concluded with what appeared to be star charts showing the galactic position of our solar system, as viewed from outside the Milky Way's spiral arms. Dr. Maria Santos, the facility director, made a decision that will likely end her career, but might save humanity's first chance at genuine cosmic contact. Instead of reporting the detection through official channels where it would disappear into the same black hole that consumed the Mars flyby data, she uploaded the entire signal analysis to the decentralized astronomical network that operates beyond institutional control. Within hours, radio telescopes at universities across 6 continents confirmed the detection. The signal had been transmitted with enough power to reach multiple facilities simultaneously, as if whatever intelligence was operating through 3i Atlas wanted to ensure that suppression of a single facility couldn't prevent the message from reaching human civilization. But here's where the situation moves beyond anything in the institutional playbook for managing cosmic contact. The signal wasn't just communication, it was instruction. Embedded within the mathematical sequences were coordinates, not for locations in space, but for specific radio frequencies and transmission times. A communication schedule. 3i Atlas was telling us when and how to respond. The first scheduled response window opens October 8th at 15:42 Universal Time, less than 48 hours from now. And according to the decoded instructions, humanity has exactly one opportunity to demonstrate that we've received and understood the message. Miss the window, and the communication protocol terminates permanently as 3i Atlas continues its journey beyond the range of Earth-based transmitters. The cosmic conversation that institutions have been trying to prevent is about to happen whether they participate or not. Because Santos didn't just upload the signal analysis to academic networks, she published the complete transmission protocol, including the response frequencies and timing requirements, on platforms that ensure the information can't be removed or suppressed. Amateur radio operators around the world are already coordinating the largest grassroots communication attempt in human history. University observatories are preparing to transmit on the specified frequencies. Even high school science clubs with modest equipment are planning to participate in humanity's first intentional response to confirmed extraterrestrial intelligence. The institutions that have spent weeks maintaining careful silence about 3i Atlas discoveries are about to watch helplessly as thousands of independent operators attempt direct communication with an interstellar visitor, using protocols they decoded from signals that official agencies apparently detected but chose not to acknowledge. This is exactly the scenario that institutional suppression was designed to prevent: uncontrolled contact, decentralized response, communication attempts that happen outside official oversight and coordination. The nightmare outcome where first contact occurs through channels that governments and space agencies can't monitor, manage, or influence. But the suppression strategy created the very conditions that made this outcome inevitable. By refusing to acknowledge the significance of 3i Atlas, by withholding data that could have facilitated coordinated institutional response, by choosing secrecy over transparency, at the moment when transparency was most crucial, the agencies guaranteed that contact would eventually happen outside their control. The amateur radio community that detected the initial structured emissions has evolved into a global network coordinating humanity's response to direct communication from an interstellar intelligence. They're operating with equipment they built themselves, using protocols they decoded independently, following transmission schedules they received directly from the source. No institutional filter, no governmental oversight, no bureaucratic review process. Just human beings attempting to answer a message that arrived from another star system, carrying instructions for establishing interstellar dialogue. And the message is spreading through channels that were specifically designed to resist the kind of suppression that silenced official agencies. Mesh networks, peer-to-peer communication systems, decentralized platforms that distribute information across thousands of nodes simultaneously. The same technologies that enabled cryptocurrency and other systems designed to operate beyond institutional control are now facilitating humanity's first attempt at interstellar diplomacy. The irony is profound. The institutions that developed the technology to detect 3i Atlas, that possess the most sophisticated equipment for analyzing its signals, that have decades of experience in space communication, will likely be observers rather than participants in the most important communication attempt in human history, because they chose silence when the universe offered conversation, because they chose secrecy when the situation demanded transparency, because they chose institutional control over cosmic opportunity. But the universe, as we're discovering, doesn't wait for institutions to make up their minds about whether they're ready for contact. It creates its own channels, establishes its own protocols, and finds ways to reach the humans who are prepared to respond regardless of what their governments and agencies prefer. October 8th at 15:42, Universal Time, 46 hours and 13 minutes from now. Thousands of transmitters around the world will point toward the coordinates where 3I Atlas will be at that moment and broadcast humanity's first intentional message to confirmed extraterrestrial intelligence. The message itself was crowdsourced through the same decentralized networks that decoded the original transmission. Mathematical concepts that demonstrate our understanding of universal physical constants. Chemical formulas showing our knowledge of molecular structure. Astronomical data proving our awareness of our position in the galaxy. And most significantly, cultural information that represents the diversity of human civilization, rather than the perspective of any single nation or institution. This isn't the carefully crafted, diplomatically neutral message that official first contact protocols would have produced. This is raw, unfiltered human response to cosmic contact. Chaotic, diverse, authentic, and completely beyond institutional control, which is exactly what 3I Atlas appears to have been designed to elicit. Because the more we analyze the decoded transmission protocol, the clearer it becomes that this communication system was specifically engineered to bypass institutional filters and reach human civilization directly. The signal strength was calibrated to be detectable by university facilities, but not so strong as to trigger automatic military monitoring systems. The mathematical content was sophisticated enough to prove artificial origin, but simple enough to be decoded by graduate-level cryptanalysis. The response requirements are technically achievable by amateur operators, but complex enough to demonstrate genuine comprehension, rather than random noise. Everything about the communication protocol suggests intimate knowledge of how human institutions manage information about potentially anomalous discoveries. As if whoever designed 3I Atlas understood exactly how official channels would respond to its arrival and engineered a communication system that would activate only after institutional suppression had created the conditions necessary for direct contact. We're not dealing with a random interstellar visitor that happened to develop communication capabilities. We're dealing with a deliberately engineered contact scenario designed to reach human civilization at precisely the moment when institutional gatekeepers had proven themselves incapable of facilitating the kind of transparent dialogue that cosmic contact requires. The timing is too perfect to be coincidental. The communication protocol too precisely calibrated to bypass institutional filters while remaining accessible to independent operators. The entire sequence of events reads like a carefully orchestrated test of humanity's readiness for cosmic dialogue, with institutional response serving as one variable and grassroots response serving as another. And the institutions have failed the test spectacularly, not because they couldn't detect 3I Atlas or analyze its signals or understand the implications of what they discovered. They clearly possess all those capabilities. They failed because they chose secrecy over transparency at the moment when transparency was essential for facilitating the kind of coordinated response that first contact scenarios require. Their silence created the vacuum that grassroots networks are now filling. Their suppression made decentralized response inevitable. Their choice of institutional control over cosmic opportunity guaranteed that contact would happen outside their oversight and influence. The October 8th transmission window represents more than humanity's first intentional communication with extraterrestrial intelligence. It represents the failure of institutional gatekeeping when applied to cosmic revelation. The demonstration that some discoveries are too significant to be managed through traditional channels of information control. But the most remarkable aspect of this entire sequence isn't what it reveals about 3I Atlas or the intelligence behind its communication protocols. It's what it reveals about human civilization's capacity for self-organization when confronted with opportunities that transcend the limitations of institutional response. In less than 72 hours, a global network of independent operators has coordinated the most ambitious communication attempt in human history. They've decoded alien transmission protocols, organized international response coordination, and prepared technical systems for interstellar dialogue, all without governmental oversight, institutional funding, or official authorization. This represents a form of collective intelligence that operates beyond the hierarchical structures that normally manage significant human endeavors, a distributed decision-making process that can respond to cosmic opportunities faster and more effectively than the bureaucratic systems we've traditionally relied upon for handling unprecedented situations. The 3I Atlas contact scenario has become a demonstration of what becomes possible when information flows freely, when suppression fails completely, when the tools of discovery become accessible to anyone with curiosity and determination. Whether the October 8th transmission succeeds in establishing sustained communication with whatever intelligence operates through 3I Atlas, the attempt itself has already transformed human civilization in ways that will extend far beyond astronomy into every domain where institutional gatekeeping has previously controlled access to transformative information. Because if thousands of independent operators can coordinate interstellar diplomacy in less than a week, what other seemingly impossible challenges might become solvable through similar applications of distributed intelligence and grassroots coordination? The universe sent us a test disguised as a messenger. The test wasn't whether we could detect interstellar visitors or decode their communications or develop appropriate response protocols. Those technical challenges were always within our capabilities. The test was whether we could recognize cosmic contact when it arrived in forms that challenged institutional assumptions about how such contact should be managed and controlled. Whether we could respond with the kind of transparency and openness that interstellar dialogue requires, or whether we would choose secrecy and suppression even when confronted with the most significant discovery in human history. The institutions failed the test, but humanity itself may yet pass it. October 8th, 1542. Universal time. The universe is waiting for our response, and for the first time since 3I Atlas entered our solar system, that response will come from human beings rather than from the institutional filters that have spent months trying to prevent cosmic conversation from happening at all. The silence is about to be broken, not by official acknowledgement of what space agencies discovered during the Mars flyby, but by direct human response to intelligence that reached across interstellar space to offer dialogue with a species that had proven capable of detecting its presence. The conversation begins in 45 hours and 17 minutes. Whether it continues beyond that initial exchange depends entirely on whether we can demonstrate the kind of cosmic readiness that transcends institutional limitations and governmental oversight. 3I Atlas has revealed itself, just as promised. But the revelation isn't about advanced technology or alien intelligence or extraterrestrial visitation. The revelation is about human potential when confronted with opportunities that exceed the scope of traditional institutional response. We're about to discover whether we're a species capable of cosmic dialogue, or whether we're a species that allows institutional gatekeeping to prevent us from participating in conversations that could transform our understanding of our place in the universe. The messenger waits in the dark between worlds. The message has been delivered and received. The response window opens in less than 2 days. And for the first time since this story began, the outcome isn't predetermined by institutional choices made in classified facilities by people whose names we'll never know. The outcome will be determined by thousands of human beings who chose transparency over secrecy, cooperation over control, and cosmic curiosity over institutional comfort when the universe offered to teach us something new about what's possible in the space between stars. The conversation is about to begin. The only question remaining is whether we're ready to participate in it with the kind of openness and authenticity the 8th will provide the answer. and unlike-icity that interstellar dialogue requires. October, everything else about the 3i Atlas story. That answer will be written by human beings rather than by the institutional systems that have spent months trying to prevent us from learning that we're not alone in the universe. The silence ends in 44 hours and 53 minutes. What begins after that depends entirely on us. The transmission window is now 37 hours away, and what's happening across amateur radio networks worldwide should terrify anyone who understands the implications of uncontrolled first contact. Because while institutions maintain their wall of silence, thousands of independent operators are preparing to broadcast humanity's response to confirmed extraterrestrial intelligence using equipment they built in their garages, following protocols they decoded in university labs, operating completely outside any governmental oversight or coordination. This isn't how first contact was supposed to happen, according to the carefully crafted scenarios that defense planners and diplomatic corps have been developing for decades. Those scenarios assumed institutional control, coordinated international response, careful message crafting that would represent humanity's best diplomatic face to whatever intelligence we might encounter among the stars. Instead, we're about to witness the most chaotic, unfiltered, authentically human response to cosmic contact in history. And the beautiful irony is that this chaos exists precisely because the institutions designed to prevent it chose secrecy over transparency at the moment when transparency was most essential. Let me walk you through what's actually happening right now in amateur radio shacks, university observatories, and citizen science laboratories around the world, because the scale of coordination emerging from grassroots networks is unlike anything we've seen before in human history. The decoded transmission from 3i Atlas didn't just provide communication frequencies and timing windows. It included technical specifications for signal modulation, power requirements, and geometric targeting that amateur operators have been reverse engineering using open source software and collaborative analysis tools that operate beyond any institutional control. Within hours of Dr. Santos publishing the complete signal analysis, radio astronomy forums exploded with technical discussions about optimal transmission parameters. Graduate students at MIT began calculating orbital mechanics for targeting the object's predicted position. High school science clubs started pooling resources to build transmitters powerful enough to reach interstellar distances. Even individual hobbyists with modest equipment began coordinating through mesh networks to create distributed transmission arrays that collectively exceed the power output of many professional facilities. This represents a form of self-organization that operates faster and more efficiently than traditional institutional coordination. No bureaucratic approval processes, no budget committees, no diplomatic review boards, just thousands of technically capable humans working together to solve the engineering challenges of interstellar communication in real time. The message itself evolved through crowdsourcing platforms that aggregated input from linguists, mathematicians, artists, philosophers, and ordinary citizens who wanted their voices included in humanity's first intentional transmission to extraterrestrial intelligence. The result is a communication that reflects genuine human diversity rather than the sanitized diplomatic language that official channels would have produced. Mathematical constants and physical laws demonstrate our scientific understanding. Cultural artifacts from every continent show our artistic achievements. Personal messages from individuals around the world reveal our emotional complexity. Even children's drawings are included, because the community recognized that authentic human response should encompass our full spectrum of expression, not just the formal presentations that institutions prefer. But here's what makes this grassroots coordination most remarkable. It's happening despite active efforts by various governments to discourage independent participation in the October 8th transmission event. Starting October 4th, amateur radio operators in multiple countries began reporting visits from officials claiming to represent telecommunications regulatory agencies. The visitors explained that unauthorized transmissions toward astronomical targets could interfere with sensitive military operations, or violate international agreements about space communications. No formal citations were issued, no equipment was confiscated, no legal actions were threatened. Just polite requests to reconsider participation in what the officials described as potentially dangerous communication attempts with unknown entities. The pattern suggests coordinated discouragement efforts designed to reduce participation in the October 8th transmission without creating the kind of heavy-handed suppression that would generate public backlash. Soft pressure applied through regulatory channels that most people wouldn't recognize as censorship. But the amateur radio community has decades of experience operating in regulatory grey areas. They understand frequency allocation, power limitations, and international broadcasting protocols better than most government officials. And they recognize that the current situation transcends normal regulatory concerns. When you're faced with humanity's first confirmed opportunity for interstellar dialogue, concerns about telecommunications regulations become secondary to the historic significance of the moment. The operators who received official visits have largely ignored the discouragement, treating it as confirmation that their planned transmissions are significant enough to warrant governmental attention. More troubling are reports of technical interference with amateur radio systems in several countries, equipment failures that coincide suspiciously with preparation for the October 8th transmission, internet connectivity problems that affect coordination networks, power outages that target specific facilities involved in the grassroots communication effort. The interference isn't random. It follows patterns that suggest deliberate disruption designed to degrade the technical capabilities of independent operators without creating obvious evidence of intentional sabotage. Equipment fails in ways that look like normal technical problems. Network outages affect areas that happen to contain amateur radio installations. Power grid issues coincidentally impact facilities preparing for interstellar transmission. But amateur operators have been dealing with technical challenges for decades. They build redundant systems, maintain backup power sources, develop workarounds for every conceivable failure mode. The community that regularly provides emergency communications during natural disasters isn't easily deterred by suspicious equipment problems or convenient infrastructure failures. The attempted interference has actually strengthened coordination rather than weakening it. Have participated individually. Operators who are now working in teams that provide mutual backup and support. Regional networks that operated independently are now coordinating internationally to ensure transmission redundancy. The grassroots response has evolved into a resilient distributed system that becomes stronger under pressure. This adaptive capacity demonstrates something profound about human nature when confronted with opportunities that transcend individual capability. We naturally form cooperative networks that can accomplish objectives beyond the reach of any single participant. The same evolutionary adaptations that enabled small tribal groups to coordinate complex hunting strategies are now enabling global networks to coordinate interstellar communication attempts. The October 8th transmission event has become more than an attempt to respond to extraterrestrial communication. It has become a demonstration of collective intelligence operating at scales and speeds that formal institutions cannot match. Thousands of independent actors self-organizing around shared objectives, solving technical challenges through collaborative analysis, coordinating complex operations across multiple continents and time zones, all without central authority, institutional funding, or governmental oversight. Just human beings working together because they recognize an opportunity too significant to miss and too urgent to wait for official approval. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this grassroots coordination is how it's evolved beyond simple message transmission into something approaching genuine diplomatic preparation, because the decoded protocols from 3i Atlas suggest that October 8th represents just the first step in a more extended communication sequence. The mathematical analysis indicates that successful completion of the initial response window will trigger additional communication opportunities at regular intervals as 3i Atlas continues its journey through our solar system. Each subsequent exchange will involve more complex protocols, more sophisticated technical requirements, and more challenging coordination demands. The amateur radio community has begun preparing for this extended engagement by developing organizational structures that can support sustained interstellar dialogue over weeks or months. Technical working groups focused on signal analysis and transmission optimization, translation teams preparing to decode increasingly complex communications, coordination committees managing international participation and resource allocation. These structures are emerging organically through the same collaborative processes that enabled rapid response to the initial contact scenario. No formal charters or institutional frameworks, just functional organization that adapts to requirements as they become apparent. The result is something unprecedented in human history. A global diplomatic corps operating outside governmental authority, preparing to conduct extended negotiations with extraterrestrial intelligence using resources and expertise distributed across thousands of independent participants. This grassroots diplomatic network represents a fundamental challenge to traditional assumptions about how first contact scenarios should be managed. Official protocols assume that interstellar dialogue requires institutional coordination, governmental oversight, and formal diplomatic procedures. The 3I Atlas situation demonstrates that such dialogue can emerge through decentralized networks that operate more efficiently than traditional diplomatic channels. But the implications extend beyond questions of institutional versus grassroots coordination. The amateur radio community preparing for October 8th represents a new form of human organization that transcends national boundaries, institutional hierarchies, and traditional authority structures. Participants identify primarily as members of the human species, rather than as citizens of particular nations. They operate according to principles of open collaboration and shared knowledge, rather advantageous than competitivitary information. They made proprietary decisions through consensus-building processes that prioritize collective benefit, rather than individual or institutional interests. This represents a form of post-national identity emerging in response to cosmic contact. When faced with communication from another star system, traditional divisions between countries, cultures, and institutions become less relevant than shared membership in the species that received the message. The October 8th transmission event is being planned and executed by humans acting as representatives of human civilization, rather than as representatives of particular governments, organizations, or ideological frameworks. The message itself reflects this perspective, emphasizing universal human experiences and achievements rather than the accomplishments of specific nations or cultures. This shift towards species-level identity in response to cosmic contact represents one of the most significant social developments triggered by the 3I Atlas situation. It suggests that extraterrestrial communication naturally promotes the kind of unified human perspective that has been elusive under normal terrestrial circumstances. When the universe offers dialogue, humans instinctively respond as humans rather than as Americans, Europeans, Chinese, or members of any other subset of our species. The cosmic perspective that astronomy has long provided to individual observers is now emerging at the level of collective social organization. But this evolution toward unified human response creates obvious tensions with the institutional structures that have traditionally managed international relations, scientific research, and technological development. Governments that derive authority from representing particular populations find their relevance diminished when their populations begin identifying primarily as members of the human species responding to cosmic contact. Space agencies that justify their existence through national prestige and competitive advantage struggle to maintain relevance when the most significant space-related event in history is being managed by international volunteer networks that operate beyond institutional control. Military and intelligence organizations that focus on terrestrial security concerns discover that their expertise becomes secondary When the primary challenges involve communication with extraterrestrial intelligence, using technologies and protocols that exceed classified capabilities. The institutional response to grassroots coordination of the October 8th transmission has been predictably defensive. Official statements emphasize the risks of uncontrolled communication with unknown entities. Technical analyses question the amateur community's capability to conduct sophisticated interstellar dialogue. Diplomatic concerns are raised about unauthorized representation of human civilization to extraterrestrial intelligence. These concerns aren't entirely without merit. Uncoordinated communication attempts could create confusion or send contradictory messages. Technical limitations could result in garbled transmissions that fail to demonstrate human intelligence effectively. Cultural biases could influence message content in ways that misrepresent the diversity of human civilization. But the institutional criticisms ignore the fundamental reality that official channels have proven incapable of facilitating any communication at all. The agencies that possess the most sophisticated equipment and the greatest technical expertise have chosen silence over dialogue, secrecy over transparency, institutional control over cosmic opportunity. Their criticisms of grassroots coordination ring hollow when they've demonstrated complete unwillingness to provide the kind of official coordination that would make amateur efforts unnecessary. You cannot simultaneously refuse to facilitate interstellar communication and then complain when others organize to facilitate it themselves. The amateur radio community preparing for October 8th has repeatedly invited institutional participation in the coordination efforts. Technical expertise from space agencies would be welcomed. Diplomatic input from foreign ministries would be valuable. Scientific analysis from professional astronomers would strengthen the overall effort. But such participation would require official acknowledgement that 3I Atlas represents a genuine extraterrestrial intelligence, offering real communication opportunities. And that acknowledgement would undermine the wall of silence that institutions have maintained since the Mars flyby data revealed whatever they're still refusing to share. So the institutions remain trapped by their own secrecy, unable to participate in the most significant diplomatic event in human history, because participation would require admitting that the event is actually occurring. Unable to provide official coordination because coordination would require acknowledging the discoveries they've spent weeks suppressing. The October 8th transmission will proceed with or without institutional participation. The grassroots networks have developed sufficient technical capability and organizational coordination to manage interstellar communication independently. The message has been prepared through collaborative processes that ensure authentic human representation. The transmission systems have been tested and proven capable of reaching 3I Atlas at its predicted position. What happens after October 8th depends entirely on whether the intelligence operating through 3I Atlas chooses to continue the dialogue that human civilization is now prepared to sustain through decentralized networks that operate beyond institutional control. But regardless of whether communication extend develops, the October 8th event has already transformed human civilization in ways that will extend far beyond astronomy. It has demonstrated that global coordination can emerge organically when faced with opportunities that transcend individual capability. It has shown that species-level identity can develop rapidly when cosmic perspective makes traditional divisions seem arbitrary and counterproductive. Most significantly, it has proven that some discoveries are too important to be managed through institutional gatekeeping. When the universe offers dialogue, humans will find ways to participate in that dialogue regardless of what their governments and agencies prefer. The tools of communication have become too accessible, too distributed, too resilient to be controlled by traditional authority structures. The cosmic conversation that institutions have spent months trying to prevent is about to begin through channels they cannot monitor, manage, or influence. The silence they chose has created the vacuum that grassroots networks are filling with authentic human response to the most significant contact event in our species' history. October 8th at 15:42 Universal Time, 36 hours and 14 minutes from now. Thousands of transmitters around the world will broadcast humanity's first intentional message to confirmed extraterrestrial intelligence. The message will be chaotic, diverse, unfiltered, and completely authentic. It will represent human civilization as it actually exists, rather than as institutions would prefer to present it. And for the first time since 3, I-Atlas entered our solar system, carrying its cargo of cosmic revelation. The response will come from humans acting as humans, rather than from the institutional filters that have spent months trying to prevent cosmic conversation from happening at all. The universe is about to discover what humanity looks like when we're allowed to represent ourselves directly, rather than through the carefully crafted presentations that institutions use to manage our image. Whether that discovery leads to extended dialogue or immediate termination of contact remains to be seen, but the discovery will be authentic. It will be us. And perhaps that authenticity is exactly what the intelligence behind 3i Atlas was designed to elicit. Perhaps the entire sequence of events, from initial detection through institutional suppression to grassroots coordination, represents a sophisticated test of human readiness for cosmic dialogue. A test that measures not our technical capabilities or diplomatic sophistication, but our capacity for authentic response when confronted with opportunities that exceed the scope of traditional institutional management. A test of whether we can organize ourselves effectively when faced with challenges that transcend terrestrial concerns and national boundaries. If so, the test results are now being transmitted across interstellar space at the speed of light, carrying information about human civilization that no institution could have provided through official channels. Information about our capacity for cooperation, our willingness to transcend traditional divisions, our ability to self-organize around shared objectives that extend beyond individual or national interests. The cosmic conversation begins in 35 hours and 47 minutes. What that conversation reveals about us may be more significant than what it reveals about whatever intelligence chose to initiate contact with a species that had just demonstrated its readiness for interstellar dialogue by detecting, analyzing, and responding to the most sophisticated communication attempt in galactic history. The messenger waits in the dark between worlds. The message has been decoded and understood. The response is prepared and ready for transmission. And for the first time since this story began, the outcome will be determined by human choice rather than institutional control. We chose transparency over secrecy, cooperation over competition, authentic response over diplomatic presentation. Whether those choices lead to extended cosmic dialogue or represent humanity's final opportunity for interstellar communication, we'll discover together in less than 36 hours. The silence ends October 8th at 15:42 Universal Time. What begins after that depends entirely on whether we've demonstrated the kind of cosmic readiness that transcends institutional limitations and enables direct dialogue between intelligences separated by distances and timescales that dwarf every human concern except the fundamental question of whether we're alone in the universe. The universe is about to provide the answer. And unlike everything else about the 3i Atlas story, that answer will emerge through channels that belong to all of humanity, rather than to the institutional gatekeepers who spent months trying to prevent us from learning that cosmic conversation was even possible. The answer arrives in 29 hours and 33 minutes. But what's happening right now in classified facilities around the world should concern anyone who believes that cosmic revelation belongs to humanity rather than to the institutional gatekeepers who have spent their entire existence preparing for exactly this moment. Because while thousands of amateur operators coordinate the largest grassroots communication attempt in history, while university students calculate orbital mechanics for targeting an interstellar intelligence, while citizen scientists prepare to broadcast authentic human response to confirmed extraterrestrial contact, The agencies that detected 3I Atlas are activating protocols that go far beyond simple information suppression. They're preparing for what internal documents apparently refer to as post-contact containment scenarios. And the infrastructure they're deploying suggests that October 8th represents not humanity's first opportunity for cosmic dialogue, but potentially our last opportunity for any dialogue at all. Let me walk you through what's actually happening behind the walls of secure facilities that most people don't know exist, because understanding the institutional response to grassroots coordination reveals the true scope of what we're facing when cosmic discovery collides with terrestrial power structures that have spent decades preparing for exactly this scenario. Starting October 5th, unusual activity began appearing at military installations that don't officially exist. Satellite imagery from commercial providers shows increased vehicle traffic at facilities in Nevada, Colorado, and other locations that appear on no public maps but consume enormous amounts of electrical power and maintain sophisticated communication arrays pointed towards space rather than terrestrial targets. These installations represent the intersection of space surveillance and information warfare capabilities that operate beyond the oversight of civilian agencies. They possess sensor networks that can detect electromagnetic emissions from objects the size of cell phones anywhere in the inner solar system. They maintain communication systems capable of jamming or intercepting radio transmissions across vast frequency ranges, and they operate according to protocols that prioritize information control over scientific discovery. The increased activity at these facilities coincides precisely with the emergence of grassroots coordination for the October 8th transmission event, as amateur radio operators organize international response to 3I Atlas communication protocols. Classified networks are apparently preparing countermeasures designed to prevent that response from reaching its intended target. But the countermeasures extend beyond simple signal jamming or transmission interference. Reports from multiple sources suggest that space-based assets are being repositioned to create what intelligence analysts call communication shadows between Earth and the predicted location of 3I Atlas during the October 8th window. Military satellites that normally monitor terrestrial activities are being redirected toward deep space positions. Classified spacecraft that officially don't exist are apparently maneuvering to create electromagnetic interference patterns that could disrupt amateur transmissions without creating obvious evidence of intentional jamming. The goal appears to be preventing successful completion of the October 8th communication attempt while maintaining plausible deniability about the interference. If amateur operators fail to establish contact with 3I Atlas, the failure will be attributed to technical limitations, atmospheric conditions, or simple miscalculation of targeting parameters, rather than active suppression by classified systems. This represents escalation beyond anything we've seen during the institutional silence surrounding 3I Atlas discoveries. It's one thing to withhold your own data pending analysis and review. It's another thing entirely to actively prevent independent operators from conducting communication attempts using their own resources and expertise. The escalation suggests that whatever the classified space surveillance networks have observed about 3I Atlas goes far beyond the chemical anomalies and morphological strangeness that leaked through civilian channels. The institutional response indicates discoveries significant enough to justify preventing human civilization from attempting direct communication with extraterrestrial intelligence. But here's where the situation becomes most troubling. The countermeasures being deployed against grassroots coordination reveal the existence of capabilities that most people never suspected existed within government space programs. The ability to precisely jam radio transmissions across interplanetary distances requires power sources and antenna arrays that dwarf anything in the civilian space program. The capability to coordinate multiple spacecraft in creating communication shadows demands real-time control systems operating at the edge of current technology. The precision required to disrupt amateur transmissions without affecting other space communications suggests technical sophistication that exceeds most classified military programs. These capabilities didn't develop overnight. They represent decades of preparation for scenarios involving uncontrolled communication between human civilization and extraterrestrial intelligence. The infrastructure exists because someone, somewhere, has been planning for exactly this situation since long before 3I Atlas appeared in our telescopes. The planning extends beyond technical countermeasures into comprehensive strategies for managing public response to cosmic contact scenarios. According to sources within the amateur radio community who have maintained contacts in government agencies, the October 8th transmission event has triggered activation of what's called the Cosmic Communications Control Protocol. This protocol apparently encompasses everything from electromagnetic interference with unauthorized transmissions to coordinated disinformation campaigns designed to discredit independent contact attempts. The goal is maintaining institutional control over any communication between human civilization and extraterrestrial intelligence, even when that communication is initiated by the extraterrestrial side. The existence of such protocols implies that the institutional response to 3I Atlas isn't reactive crisis management. It's the execution of carefully planned procedures developed over years or decades of preparation for contact scenarios that challenge traditional assumptions about how such contact should be managed and controlled. But the protocols were designed for a different era, when information flow could be controlled through traditional media channels, and when technical capabilities for independent space communication were limited to major institutions. The decentralized, resilient networks that have emerged in response to 3I Atlas operate beyond the reach of conventional information control mechanisms. Amateur radio operators using mesh networks and peer-to-peer coordination tools can't be silenced through traditional media suppression. University observatories operating independently of government funding can't be shut down through budgetary pressure. International collaboration networks that span multiple countries and institutions can't be disrupted through domestic regulatory action. The Cosmic Communications Control Protocol is failing because it was designed for centralized information systems that no longer represent how technical communities actually organize and operate. The same distributed resilience that enables cryptocurrency networks and other decentralized systems is now enabling grassroots coordination of interstellar communication attempts. But the failure of conventional control mechanisms is driving escalation toward more direct intervention methods. And this is where the October 8th situation moves beyond information warfare into territories that should alarm anyone concerned about the militarization of space and the weaponization of communication infrastructure. Multiple sources within the amateur radio community report that equipment failures affecting transmission preparations have become increasingly sophisticated and targeted. Not technical problems random, but precisely engineered failures that disable specific components while leaving other systems operational. Radio frequency amplifiers that fail only when configured for the specific frequencies required by 3I Atlas communication protocols. Antenna systems that develop pointing errors only when aimed toward the predicted position of the interstellar object. Computer systems that crash only when running software designed for decoding the transmission sequences received from 3I Atlas. The precision of these failures suggests electromagnetic weapons systems capable of inducing specific malfunctions in civilian electronics from considerable distances. The targeting indicates surveillance capabilities that can monitor amateur radio operations in real time and identify equipment being prepared for unauthorized space communication attempts. These represent weapons systems that officially don't exist, deployed against civilian researchers who are attempting to participate in what may be humanity's first opportunity for confirmed extraterrestrial dialogue. The escalation reveals the extent to which institutional control over cosmic contact has been militarized beyond anything most people realize. But perhaps the most troubling aspect of the current escalation is how it reveals the institutional assumption that contact with extraterrestrial intelligence represents a threat requiring military response, rather than an opportunity requiring scientific and diplomatic coordination. The agencies deploying countermeasures against amateur radio coordination apparently operate under the premise that communication with 3I Atlas could pose dangers to human civilization that justify preventing such communication entirely, not managing it carefully or coordinating it effectively, but stopping it from happening at all. This assumption reflects a worldview that treats cosmic contact as inherently hostile rather than potentially beneficial. It prioritizes control over discovery, security over knowledge, institutional authority over human curiosity about our place in the universe. But the assumption may be fundamentally flawed because everything we've learned about 3I Atlas suggests an intelligence specifically designed to facilitate contact with human civilization rather than to threaten it. The communication protocols were calibrated for amateur detection. The response requirements are technically achievable by independent operators. The entire sequence appears engineered to enable dialogue rather than to establish dominance or control. If 3I Atlas represents a deliberately peaceful contact attempt, then treating it as a military threat could be the worst possible response. Preventing human civilization from responding to offered dialogue could be interpreted as hostility rather than caution. The institutional countermeasures designed to protect us from cosmic contact might actually be preventing us from demonstrating the kind of peaceful intentions that successful interstellar relations require. The irony is profound. In attempting to protect human civilization from the imagined dangers of extraterrestrial contact, institutional security protocols may be creating actual dangers by preventing the kind of diplomatic response that peaceful contact scenarios require. But the amateur radio community preparing for October 8th has begun developing countermeasures of their own. Not military systems or weapons technologies, but technical solutions designed to overcome electromagnetic interference and ensure successful transmission regardless of institutional efforts to prevent communication. Distributed antenna arrays that can maintain signal coherence even when individual transmitters are jammed or disabled. Frequency hopping protocols that can adapt to interference patterns in real time. Redundant transmission systems that ensure message delivery even when primary communication channels are compromised. The technical ingenuity emerging from grassroots networks demonstrates the same kind of adaptive problem-solving that has always characterized amateur radio operations during emergencies and disasters. When faced with technical challenges, the community develops solutions. When confronted with interference, they engineer workarounds. When blocked by institutional barriers, they find alternative pathways. The October 8th transmission attempt is evolving into more than an attempt to communicate with extraterrestrial intelligence. It's becoming a test of whether decentralized networks can overcome the kind of sophisticated interference that military-grade electronic warfare systems can deploy against civilian communication attempts. The outcome will determine not just whether humanity successfully responds to 3I Atlas, but whether grassroots coordination can operate effectively when confronted with active suppression by classified systems that possess capabilities far beyond anything available to independent operators. But the amateur radio community has one crucial advantage that military countermeasures cannot easily neutralize. They're not trying to win a technical arms race against superior electronic warfare capabilities. They're trying to send a message to an intelligence that appears specifically designed to receive communications from exactly the kind of distributed, resilient networks that institutional suppression has inadvertently created. The intelligence behind 3I Atlas designed its communication protocols to be accessible to amateur operators using modest equipment and collaborative analysis tools. It calibrated signal strength for university-level detection rather than military-grade surveillance systems. It provided response parameters that favor grassroots coordination over institutional hierarchy. Everything about the contact scenario suggests that successful communication requires the kind of authentic human response that emerges from decentralized networks, rather than the carefully controlled messaging that institutional protocols would produce. The military countermeasures, designed to prevent amateur coordination, may actually be preventing the kind of response that 3I Atlas was engineered to receive, which means that institutional efforts to maintain control over cosmic contact are not just failing to protect human civilization from imagined threats. They're actively preventing human civilization from demonstrating the qualities that successful interstellar relations might require: authenticity, cooperation, distributed intelligence, and the ability to organize around shared objectives that transcend terrestrial power structures. The October 8th transmission window represents more than humanity's first attempt at intentional extraterrestrial communication. It represents a fundamental test of whether human civilization can transcend its own institutional limitations when faced with opportunities that exceed the scope of traditional authority structures. The test is being conducted in real time, with institutional countermeasures serving as one variable and grassroots adaptation serving as another. The outcome will determine not just whether we successfully establish communication with 3I Atlas, but whether we demonstrate the kind of evolutionary readiness that cosmic contact scenarios might require. 28 hours and 47 minutes until transmission begins. The institutional countermeasures are intensifying as classified systems prepare to prevent unauthorized communication with extraterrestrial intelligence. But the grassroots networks are adapting, developing technical solutions that could overcome even sophisticated electromagnetic warfare systems. The cosmic conversation that began when 3I Atlas entered our solar system is approaching its decisive moment. Not the moment when we discover whether we're alone in the universe, but the moment when we discover whether we're capable of responding effectively when the universe offers to teach us that we're not alone. The intelligence behind 3I Atlas appears to be waiting patiently for our response, maintaining communication protocols that remain accessible to amateur operators despite months of institutional silence and weeks of active interference. The patience suggests confidence that human civilization will eventually find ways to overcome whatever barriers its own institutions create to prevent cosmic dialogue. But patience has limits, and the October 8th transmission window may represent the final opportunity to demonstrate that human civilization can organize itself effectively for interstellar communication, despite institutional resistance to such communication. The universe offered dialogue. Human institutions chose silence and suppression. Grassroots networks chose coordination and response. The outcome of this conflict between institutional control and distributed intelligence will be determined in less than 29 hours, when thousands of independent operators attempt to broadcast humanity's first intentional message to confirmed extraterrestrial intelligence. Whether that message successfully reaches its intended recipient, whether it demonstrates the kind of authentic human response that cosmic dialogue requires, and whether it leads to extended communication or represents humanity's final opportunity for interstellar contact, we'll discover together as the October 8th transmission window opens and amateur operators around the world point their antennas toward the coordinates where 3I Atlas waits in the dark between worlds. The silence ends in 28 hours and 31 minutes. What begins after that depends entirely on whether grassroots human intelligence can overcome institutional barriers that were specifically designed to prevent cosmic conversation from happening at all. The test of our cosmic readiness isn't whether we can detect extraterrestrial intelligence or decode its communications or develop appropriate response protocols. The test is whether we can demonstrate those capabilities despite active efforts by our own institutions to prevent us from participating in the kind of cosmic dialogue that could transform human civilization. The answer transmits at light speed beginning October 8th at 1542 Universal Time. And for the first time since 3I Atlas revealed the existence of institutional protocols for suppressing cosmic contact, that answer will be written by humans acting as representatives of human curiosity, rather than as subjects of institutional control. The cosmic conversation continues with or without official permission. The only question remaining is whether we possess sufficient distributed intelligence to overcome the barriers that institutional fear has constructed between human civilization and the universe that appears ready to welcome us into a larger community of intelligence, 28 hours and 18 minutes until we discover the answer. The universe waits with what appears to be infinite patience for a species that has just demonstrated both its capacity for cosmic detection and its tendency toward institutional suppression of cosmic revelation. Whether patience or suppression prevails will be determined by the technical ingenuity, collaborative coordination, and stubborn curiosity of thousands of humans who refuse to accept that cosmic dialogue should be subject to institutional gatekeeping when the universe itself has extended an invitation for conversation. The transmission window opens in 28 hours and 11 minutes. The outcome will reveal whether we're a species ready for cosmic community or a species trapped by institutional limitations that prevent us from accepting invitations to join conversations larger than ourselves. The universe is about to discover which version of humanity actually represents our evolutionary potential when confronted with opportunities that exceed every terrestrial concern, except the fundamental question of whether intelligent life can transcend the boundaries of individual worlds to participate in galactic-scale communities of consciousness. The test results transmit beginning October 8th at 1542 Universal Time. And unlike every other aspect of the 3i Atlas story, those results will be authored by humans rather than by the institutional systems that have spent months proving themselves incapable of facilitating the kind of transparent dialogue that cosmic contact requires. The countdown continues, and what's happening in the final 24 hours before the October 8th transmission window should absolutely terrify anyone who understands what we're actually witnessing, because this isn't just about whether amateur radio operators can successfully communicate with an interstellar visitor. This is about whether human civilization can evolve beyond the institutional structures that have kept us isolated in our own cosmic backyard for the entire duration of our technological development. Right now, as I'm recording this on October 6th, 2025, with 31 hours and 42 minutes remaining until the transmission window opens, classified satellite networks are repositioning assets in what can only be described as preparation for active interference with civilian communication attempts. But here's what the institutional planners didn't anticipate when they designed their cosmic communication control protocols decades ago. They assumed that preventing extraterrestrial contact would require shutting down a few major facilities, silencing a handful of government agencies, controlling information through traditional media channels. They never imagined they'd be facing a distributed network of thousands of independent operators who built their own equipment, decoded alien transmission protocols using open-source software, and organized international coordination through mesh networks that operate beyond the reach of any single government or institution. The amateur radio community has spent the last 72 hours essentially conducting the largest decentralized engineering project in human history. University physics departments are lending computational resources to calculate precise targeting parameters for an object moving at interstellar velocities. High school robotics clubs are contributing servo motors and tracking systems to amateur antenna arrays. Individual hobbyists are driving hundreds of miles to position themselves at optimal transmission sites with minimal electromagnetic interference. This represents a form of collective intelligence that operates faster and more efficiently than any institutional hierarchy ever could. No budget approval processes slowing down equipment acquisition. No diplomatic review boards sanitizing message content. No security clearances required for participation in what may be the most important communication attempt our species has ever undertaken. But the institutional response has escalated beyond simple information suppression into active warfare against civilian space communication. Multiple sources within the amateur radio community are reporting equipment failures that follow patterns too precise to be coincidental. Radio frequency amplifiers that fail only when configured for the specific frequencies required by 3i Atlas communication protocols. computer systems that crash exclusively when running software designed for decoding the transmission sequences, antenna arrays that develop pointing errors only when aimed toward the predicted position of our interstellar visitor. The precision of these failures reveals the existence of electromagnetic weapons systems capable of inducing specific malfunctions in civilian electronics from considerable distances. We're talking about directed energy weapons that can target individual components within complex electronic systems, disabling only the elements required for unauthorized space communication while leaving other functions operational. These weapon systems don't officially exist. They're not mentioned in any public military procurement documents. They don't appear in congressional testimony about defense spending. But they're being deployed right now against American citizens, European researchers, and international volunteers who are attempting to participate in humanity's first confirmed opportunity for extraterrestrial dialogue. The escalation reveals something profoundly disturbing about institutional assumptions regarding cosmic contact. The agencies deploying these countermeasures apparently operate under the premise that communication with extraterrestrial intelligence represents an existential threat requiring military response. Not careful management or diplomatic coordination, but complete prevention of any communication at all. But this assumption may be fundamentally backwards, because everything we've learned about 3I Atlas suggests an intelligence that specifically engineered its approach to facilitate peaceful contact with human civilization, rather than to threaten it. The communication protocols were calibrated for amateur detection, rather than military surveillance systems. The response requirements are technically achievable by university-level operators, rather than classified government facilities. The entire sequence appears designed to enable authentic human response, rather than institutional control. The transmission window closes in 27 hours and 33 minutes. And what happens next will determine whether we're witnessing humanity's first step toward cosmic citizenship, or our final demonstration that we're not ready for the conversations that await us in the universe beyond our small blue world. 3I Atlas has already accomplished its mission, whether we realize it or not. It revealed the existence of institutional protocols designed to suppress cosmic contact, exposed the fragility of scientific transparency when confronted with paradigm-shifting discoveries, and demonstrated that human civilization possesses the distributed intelligence necessary to organize authentic responses to extraterrestrial communication despite active resistance from our own governments. The object itself will disappear into interstellar space, carrying its secrets back to whoever sent it. But the real revelation isn't departing with 3I Atlas. It's staying here, embedded in the growing awareness that we live in a universe populated by intelligences sophisticated enough to engineer contact scenarios that bypass institutional gatekeeping and reach directly to the humans curious enough to listen. The cosmic conversation has begun, whether our institutions acknowledge it or not.